So we've seen today, and it's been discussed, that the window to keep warming below 2 degrees is fast closing. And Joyita Gupta showed us this morning that it's already an unfair impact on some populations. And we have also dangerous impacts on other planetary boundaries. So new paradigms are needed, new approaches are needed. The aim we want to discuss today is how to operationalize solutions at a planetary scale, because that's what we need. And for that, we need to mobilize everybody in every aspect of their lives. But where do we start? The evidence shows that there are co-benefits of investment in climate action, and the co-benefits, the cost of co-benefits are less than the cost of inaction. And our panel today will try to answer the questions: how do we get exponential in the implementation of solutions? How to bust the myth of unaffordability, so everybody understands that it's affordable to implement climate action, and how to rise the challenge. So for this panel, we have 4 panelists, 2 online and 2 with me here. The first person I want to present is Fiona Macklin. She's currently a senior advisor at Groundswell. Groundswell is a project, a joint project by the Jeff Bezos Earth Fund and Global Optimism and the Systems Change Lab. And Fiona, before that, was a campaign director for Race to Zero at the UNFCCC. After Fiona, we have also online Rob McQuire. Sorry if I don't say the name well. Rob is an advisor in climate policy and a former policy analyst and research advisor to Lord Nicholas Stern at the Grantham Research Institute at LSE, the London School of Economics. After Rob, we will have Mathieu, who's a former student of the École Polytechnique and École Normale Supérieure de Paris, where he studied quantum optics and condensed matter physics. And recently, Mathieu published an opinion piece on a Manhattan project for ecological transition, and he will tell us more about that. And last but not least, my colleague and director, Bruno Jochum, who's the executive director and founder of the Climate Action Accelerator. And Bruno, today we will start by you and a description of the approach to acceleration of the Climate Action Accelerator. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Alexandre. So first of all, I mean, this is a very important topic, changing the paradigm and models of acceleration in the face of well, the time which is shortening every year to actually achieve a stabilization of the climate situation. And of course, we know it's way beyond climate. It's all the other planetary boundaries. And the Climate Action Accelerator, of course, we're very humble about what we can do as a group. But we also think it's very important to contribute to the thinking around models of acceleration, because basically most institutions, most organizations in society today are very far from having any sort of plan to actually contribute to the reduction of emissions or even adaptation and resilience. So there's been a lot of efforts on policy level, trying to have, government policy, funding streams, etc., to actually change society, change practices. There's a lot of focus on mobilizations of citizens who basically demand change. But when it comes to, mid-level institutions, of course, things are moving, and notably, there are, remarkable examples in towns, territories, but also businesses that are at the forefront, but we're still very far from actually the level that's needed. So what we've tried to, I would say, humbly contribute to is to see how you can actually, at the level of a given sector, in our case, the humanitarian, the aid sector, but also the health sector, how can you actually mobilize these mid-level institutions that are influential in their area with their peers around very, I would say, strong commitments, and then how to operationalize them. And the way we've actually taken this approach is identifying in the sector what are leading organizations that can actually bring others on board. So this is why we thought partnering with ICRC, with Médecins Sans Frontières, the Terre des Hommes movement, now UNITAID, all of these actors actually have a sphere of influence on others. And when it comes to the health sector, we know the health sector is a very large one. It's actually its emissions are actually very large. It's one of the biggest sectors in terms of emissions. It's not very well known, but it's the case. And what we've been working on in terms of theory of change is how do you actually contribute to the domino effect, and how do you have a horizontal effect in society at the level of peers. So what's interesting is to see, for example, if you take ICRC, it's at the center of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, which is one of the few human organizations present in almost every country, every district in the world, with representatives of the Red Cross, Red Crescent Society in link with local authorities, with communities, with suppliers, etc. If you take UN agencies today, and notably the ones working in the humanitarian aid system, they are critical players in terms of programming of funds, and the way they decide to redesign some of their programming through climate smart approaches will influence hundreds and thousands of actors in different countries of the world. And I think that's the interesting part. The second is really, and we've seen this repeatedly, a lot of, I think we're at a stage where there's a mental shift going on in society at leadership level on the need to do something. But the question is, can we really take such a commitment? Is it feasible? And how can we operationalize it in practice? And there's still, even among those who are, ready to move, there's still a lot of apprehension on actually exposing oneself to risks if they take too ambitious commitments and they're not able to deliver. So it's actually paradoxical, because basically we're in need of an emergency approach, but the apprehension of reputational risk, for example, actually puts us in a situation where the collective risk is actually much higher. And operationalizing climate action today is left mainly to private consultants, so who are very good professionals among them, but they are responding to a market. So there's a demand, there's an offer. It's usually the client who determines the objective. What we're lacking is an operational support approach, which actually is principled, is fully aligned to Paris Agreement targets, and which also tries to play the domino effect, and how you can basically, by working with some partners, really have impact on potentially hundreds or thousands of other actors in the area. I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you, Bruno. So I'm a bit biased because we talk about these things every week. But yeah, what I can summarize for what you said is, like, the CAA targets or the Climate Action Accelerator targets influential organizations, so they influence their network. And what we want to see is that they could influence hundreds or thousands of other actors in their networks or in their sectors. And now I'm going to give the floor to Fiona, and we would like to hear your perspective on this kind of massive mobilization of organizations in different sectors, mostly based on your experience with the Race to Zero. Fiona.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's a really loud echo. I don't know if there's any chance of fixing that. If not, I will carry on. That sounds better. Hi everyone, I'm Fiona. It's really great to be with you today, and also to see everyone joining virtually. So thank you so much for having me for such an important conversation. As you've mentioned, I had previously been involved working with the Race to Zero campaign, which is a campaign driven by the climate champions that are mandated by the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to mobilize these non-state actors, so the businesses, the finance players, the cities, the regions, and other organizations, including all the partners of the Climate Action Accelerator. Currently now over 12,000 non-state actors across the global economy that are committing to really robust net zero plans and beginning to contribute their fair share of halving global emissions by 2030. Earlier this year, I changed from that role into setting up a bit of a behind the scenes project and campaign, which we're referring to as Groundswell. And really the point of that is actually working very much in collaboration with campaigns like Race to Zero, but to help flip the narrative on climate. And Bruno, to what you were saying, really shift our mindsets into understanding what it's going to take to deliver this transformative action, and actually really highlight the momentum that is already underway in driving progress and transformations, in particular in response to the global stocktake process, which is quite a formal process and a techie process that was undertaken and has been going over the past couple of years to really take stock of where we are at. And this Groundswell campaign is really dedicated towards injecting a sense of possibility into the narrative so that mobilization campaigns like Race to Zero can be further supported in bringing and mobilizing businesses. I think a few comments, 4 thoughts mainly to kick off with in terms of the mindset behind this mobilization that I feel is important to emphasize is, first of all, we are way off track. And Bruno, as you've already alluded to, we don't need a global stocktake official process or report to tell us this. We can see it every day in terms of the weather impacts that we are witnessing all across the world, whether that's floods, droughts, wildfires, and so on. And indeed, I might even suggest that I think we need to go so much more than below 2 degrees. It really has to be a 1.5 degree aim that we are all collectively charting towards. And we are nowhere near where we need to be on that trajectory. So it's really clear as a second thought that acting later is too late. This is really our problem to solve, but more importantly, it's our opportunity to take. And in this global crisis moment, I think this is very much like very comparable to the COVID crisis that we experienced globally a couple of years ago. Every day of delay in locking down or in helping to develop vaccines causes deaths. And so this is really an opportunity to come together across the global community, because we just have no time to waste. But thirdly, and I think really importantly, it's critical that we understand that change is happening faster than we think. And we're seeing this across major sectors of the economy. And I'm sure Rob, who's been doing a lot of research on this, will provide even further examples. But in the power sector, for example, we're halving the cost of solar and wind energy every 6 and 9 years, respectively. Or in transport, we're currently doubling the rate of electric vehicle sales every 12 years. And similarly, we're seeing hugely positive trends in the heavy industry sectors like steel, concrete, aluminium. This is massive to understand. And Alexander, you mentioned at the start in the introduction, this idea of changing the paradigm and understanding exponential change. This is really a mindset that we need to collectively unite behind, because whilst we might think that change is sort of happening slowly and not getting us where we need to go, it is actually possible to dramatically uplift the trends in these sectors. And I think that gives us confidence that we can still course correct the delivery of the Paris Agreement, get ourselves back on track to delivering 1.5 degrees. However, fourthly, and really importantly, that success isn't inevitable. So it's not to say that given that we're seeing change happening, we need to throw back our hands and celebrate. Absolutely not. This is the time to double down and collectively make a choice away from business as usual and really leaning into positive economic, social opportunities and technological opportunities that this clean future presents. So I think as a sort of closing quick thought, we're really currently facing two exponential truths. The first is that we're witnessing constantly worsening impacts across the world. They're rapidly accelerating, also faster than we think, and they are getting much worse and much more fatal. And on the other hand, we're really starting to witness this exponential positive change across crucial sectors of the economy. And so I think in response to that, and to really lean into this mindset of agency, which can direct us back on a path to course correcting the Paris Agreement, we really need three things as a mindset in mobilization. The first is that solidarity and collaborative competition in a way. We have so much research now to suggest the economic insanity of continuing to explore oil, gas, coal, and the economic opportunities of really leading the way in the transition. But secondly, it's not just collaboration and sort of rallying between businesses and other organizations. It's really this coordinated effort between businesses, other non-state actors, and governments that is going to unlock change. And Bruno, you were mentioning policies and the importance of that. So businesses informing and demonstrating their appetite to change will help unlock policies that are transformative. And then thirdly, I think this stubborn mindset of optimism and possibility that we can do this together in an urgent way is really important. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. And there was a lot in what you said, but I like how you articulate how narratives can support the mobilization. And if I can summarize, you're very optimist because so many networks are starting to join together, and we can do more through collaboration between different sectors and different type of actors. And the message of hope always support this. And the better we act soon, the better it is in the end. And Mathieu, now I'm going to turn to you. Having heard the approach of the Climate Action Accelerator Bruno described and the perspective of Fiona on how we can mobilize the people, could you describe the proposed Manhattan Project for ecological transition and how it could contribute to this acceleration of climate action?
Yes. So thank you very much, Alexandra, and thank you to the Accelerator for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I'm very happy to be here. So yes, the first thing I want to speak briefly about is just how crazy our society today, our industrial world, depends on many scientific problems, many processes that have been developed by engineers and by scientists during decades and even centuries sometimes. And it's crazy to see how they are widespread. And now, in fact, everything we do every day depends on these processes. So just a few examples. So for example, of course, when you use a car, you use an engine of an engine that has been developed for by the company, and the steel of the car. I mean, it's a process that is done every day, and that has a huge carbon footprint. And then you can maybe you will eat something during the day, and if you eat bread, so you have crops, and the crops, they need ammonia, and so the synthesis of ammonia itself is a process that dates back to the start of the 20th century, and it has in fact never really changed. And so in fact it's crazy to see how, if we want to move out of fossil fuels and reduce carbon emissions as a whole, in fact it's an extremely hard problem, even simply from a technological point of view. It's not only the will to change, it's really physical problems that we, for the larger part, we have simply never addressed, because we have never wondered to get out of carbon for ammonia or for energy storage or for food production, for and I could go on for I don't know. So here another point that I want to make clear as well is that there are not only fossil fuels that we need to get out of. In fact, you have many processes in industry everywhere that produce carbon dioxide, but they don't necessarily use fossil fuels. It's not the same. And for example, let's say you want to produce aluminium. We use aluminium every day. So we today, since a few decades, we use electrolysis of aluminium. So we use alumina, so which is an oxide of the aluminium, and we heat it to several thousands of degrees, and then we have liquid molten salt, and then we use extremely high currents, electrical currents in the bath of liquid alumina, and then we get out of all the oxide, and then we produce carbon dioxide. So it's hugely intensive in the carbon, but it's not because of coal or oil. It's just the physical process itself that we use, and it's the same for steel. It's the same for ammonia, and it's the same everywhere. So that's a very big deal, and we have never just found another process yet. So all this to say, maybe I'm a bit too long, but okay. So we have many of these processes that are at the core of our society and that we need to change. And so the thing is, we have leads, we have some ideas of other processes that we could try. We know in which direction we should look for. And many ideas have started to develop. Now we can produce electricity without gas, so using solar, using the wind, using we have many other emerging technologies that are not well known yet. For example, we can also use salinity gradients in the sea or temperature gradients, and it's nice because it's not intermittent. So it's in some extent it's better than the solar and the wind. So the problem with all these new technologies is that they are not developed yet. They are extremely expensive compared to solar and wind, and extremely expensive, like even of course much more than fossil fuels, because all the fossil fuel technologies, even all our traditional processes, they have been optimized for so long that they are very efficient, and they cost nothing. They are just super cheap. And so it's how do you get out of such a system? It's a very hard question. So what we address as scientists is that we need to develop these new processes, and we need to do it as fast as possible in order to give society and democracy the possibility to use them and to shift. And so if we want to develop this, we need to get out of the business as usual in the research and in the engineering and in the industrial processes. And that's really the core of our message, that we need a new way to do the research. And we need to, so what we propose with the Manhattan Project for ecological transition is in fact very, very close to what the situation they had during the World War. The Second World War, there was a national emergency in the US. It was a question of survival. The whole economy was driven towards winning the war. Everyone was working on this, and so even the fundamental science, nuclear physics was starting since a few years only, and then they even they managed to identify what they should do, and then they built the whole complex of industry and of making putting the right people at the right place in order to scale up as fast as possible, because you just don't have time for the business as usual with exploratory research and cherry picking the right promising technologies using venture capitals and just then choosing the right startup. You don't have time for this. You need to think, because we know what we have to do. So we just need to think and to search in the right directions. And so that's really what we propose with the Manhattan Project, to link fundamental science, engineering, and the scaling up with the industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for that, we need a huge financial effort to launch all this research and project, right? And that's a very good transition to give the floor to Rob. And we would like to ask you to start by presenting some of the findings of the Stern review of the economics of climate change. The floor is yours, Rob.
Thank you, Alexandre. Please, could you mute in the auditorium? There's an echo. Yep, great, thank you. And I also had some slides that I think were going to be shown. So is it possible for us to see those as well online? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, Rob.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we were supposed to do a Menti, but we'll give you the floor directly. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everybody. So yeah, it's great to be here and join you all. Thank you to Climate Action Accelerator for inviting me. Yeah, indeed, I'm now an independent advisor and researcher on climate finance and just transition, but formerly worked with Nick Stern and many others at the Grantham Research Institute at LSE in London. I'll speak briefly to the Stern review before sort of diving into some of these graphics that I've prepared for us to get our head around some of the numbers here. And I'd like to echo a lot of things that the former panelists have said as well. But on the Stern review, I think it's worth reflecting that that's over 15 years ago now, as a piece of research identifying the problem we face in economic terms when it comes to climate change. But it's still extremely relevant. I can quote directly, the costs of stabilizing the climate are significant but manageable. Delay would be dangerous and much more costly. I think the bad news is that that's pretty much still the case. And the good news is that a lot of progress has been made in the time since that was written. If anything, the Stern review potentially underestimated the risks, the damage associated with temperature rises and the probabilities of those, because we've seen spiraling evidence in the science, in the IPCC reports, but as Fiona said, we can see it with our own eyes all around. So I think the main message that's really important here, and as all the panelists are emphasizing, is that this climate action is a strategic choice, which leads to a superior economic future if taken strongly, whichever way you cut it. The graphics that I've got on this first slide help us understand the scale of the things I've just been saying. Sorry, please, can you go back to the one before? Thank you so much. So currently we have on the right-hand side, global climate finance flows. This is from great research by Climate Policy Initiative, which you can see is much smaller than other forms of financial flows. And indeed, the annual global climate finance flows are too low compared to what we need for the 1.5 degree scenario. And so that implies that there's a big investment need to meet here. But as I was just saying, the losses under a 1.5 degree scenario are much larger than those needs. So it's important. But I think the right-hand graphic is crucial here, in that the money is in fact there. It's really important when talking about cost or finance or investment to recall that the sort of business as usual trajectory we're on involves enormous investment in lots of things that are in fact not helping to create a more livable and safer world. And in many ways, investment in lots of things is too low for global development needs. And so this is not just a question of raising extra money, but also redirecting what's currently being spent. Okay, thank you. Please, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. And cost estimates really ultimately depend on the assumptions we're making about the availability and costs of different emission abatement technologies, and the scale and pace of emission cuts. So models with parameters that are based on current or even historical values are sort of unable by design to account for the extent of innovation that's going to take place. So there's always a pinch of salt with some of those projections, as we'll see in a second as well. But I think this is a really important graphic to focus on. It's very complicated, so I'll just try to summarize it. But the down the left, you have all sorts of different technologies, and the length of the bar is not so important in total, but it's the possible contribution to mitigating emissions. But the colors are really key here. So where there's blue and those wind and solar large blue bars on the top, that shows just how much potential of reducing emissions can be done with cost savings at the moment. This is from the IPCC's mitigation section or working group 3 of the 6th assessment report. In other sectors, well, in transport, I think it's notable that the emissions savings can also be achieved at lower cost. That's in the bottom right in most areas. In land use and agriculture, in the sort of middle on the left, we face a little bit more of a challenge. And so that's one key area where innovation is sorely needed. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So there's really room for hope here, because focusing for a second on the renewable energies, this graphic shows that the projections of falling costs, have consistently been too conservative. So renewable energies have become cheaper, faster, this is in the case of solar, cheaper, faster than expected by the IEA and others indeed. And we're seeing similar patterns now for batteries, lithium-ion batteries. I'm sure there's similar patterns for wind. And importantly, of course, renewable energies are inputs into so many other industries and sectors. And so these dramatically falling costs will result in further falling costs in other areas. Indeed, there's other panelists have mentioned lots of important examples where there are potential tipping points just around the corner. We had a study from Systemic called the Breakthrough Effect this year, which showed 3 sectors that could be on the verge, where low carbon alternatives are going to outcompete existing high carbon solutions. And so those are EVs, for electric vehicles, sorry, for road transport, green ammonia used with hydrogen as a key part of that value chain, and alternative proteins. And I must stress the importance of government policy in terms of production mandates and public procurement to help get these tipping points over the line. And once they occur, it becomes a self-reinforcing feedback loop where it just makes sense for everybody to use the lower carbon alternative. So I think this is really important, because it means not only by undertaking climate mitigation can we reduce the external costs, not only through physical climate damages, but also avoided rents to the fossil fuel sector and other large incumbent industries that are capturing lots of rents and draining public budgets. Also avoiding asset stranding, where eventually fossil fuel production and other sorts of assets will become economically unviable and result in losses. But in general, the process of production can be made cheaper, and so that you avoid all those costs, but you also make things cheaper to do and to produce. So there are huge benefits here that don't actually have to do with avoiding climate change per se. Could we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I'll try to keep this brief, and we can move to the panel conversation after. But a really important point is how therefore we're going to achieve, and that was where we were getting to from the previous interventions, these cost declines. Where will the investment come from? So fiscal policy from government is a huge lever that's available. It must be targeted towards specific investment in measurable assets that can generate huge economies of scale in production and innovation. Time frame matters. So in the short term, it might be slightly difficult for even governments in richer countries to face their debt servicing costs, to navigate tight labor markets, to navigate inflation, which will obviously put downward pressure on growth once central banks react. But really, if we're thinking about the time frame for these costs and changes that I've just been presenting, then there are really huge multipliers over the longer term. And investing in appropriate innovation will have great benefits. They're labor intensive. They reduce, they improve resilience of the overall economy. They bring health benefits and productivity from newer technologies. But many countries are not placed to be able to do this. So the final data that I'm presenting here is results from the independent high-level expert group on climate finance, which is producing a new report for this coming COP, but last year produced an analysis with recommendations. And a key takeaway is the enormous financing gap for emerging markets and developing economies, if you exclude China from that category. We find a $1 trillion per year gap in external finance that's needed by 2030. So there really needs to be what is called in that report a big push of investment. So collaboration must be between different kinds of institutions and actors, but also international. And this is not purely an act of solidarity, although it is that, but it is an act of self-interest for richer countries with the ability to help make these, or provide that finance and help to make these investments in countries with less financial resources, because of all the benefits that will then come back round in the way that I've been presenting just now, and reducing costs in terms of external costs and reducing costs in terms of the actual process of growth and production. So I will leave it there for now, but really look forward to picking up some more of this as we go through the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. I think you made a very convincing argument on how we need more investments. And I personally find very complementary your presentation with the one of Mathieu, calling for a shift in physical processes. And for that, we need a lot of investment. And in the end, you also talked about the different social, economical, even health co-benefits of many policies and actions that can be implemented. And I would like to ask you, Bruno, shortly, what examples you could give of findings of the financial impact of operationalizing climate action and the different co-benefits we see in this.
Yeah, so what we've been doing is cost modelization of different roadmap implementations at the level of, so we have a sample of about 8 organizations. They're not necessarily representative of the whole of society, but they represent, service organizations in the humanitarian and health sector. And we were actually quite surprised by what we found, because we're actually to levels of costs which are estimations, which are much lower than we previously thought, and which goes against a bit the myth of unaffordability of action. So what we found is generally levels of total gross costs of about often between 1% and 2% of an annual budget, and savings which often were greater than 1%. So net costs which were actually between 0 and 1%. So obviously it varies from organization to organization, and you can't generalize. But it does raise a question. It does raise a real question, because when you're at the level of the management of an institution or an organization, and you consider the risks in front of us, is making decisions on 0 to 2% of your budget is part of daily choices. I mean, these are choices of any management team, board, etc., every year. And it is going to become harder and harder to justify why this effort is not organized at the level of institutions and organizations, knowing what we know and knowing what the real future costs of inaction are, ahead of us. The other thing is really to understand that the inflation coming from higher energy costs and higher production costs is actually much higher than that, much higher than that, and it is today limiting the operational capacity of many organizations, because actually they're losing purchasing power. And when you relate, and notably because of the dependency of their cost structure to fossil fuels and other production issues. And so when you actually compare what is the trajectory of an organization over the next 5 to 10 years in a business as usual scenario compared to actually acting on their own cost structure, etc., well, the benefits appear very clearly. And the question becomes actually quite different. It's not about, what can we do to reduce, etc. It's actually how can you operate better in a world where energy prices are going to be structurally higher. And if you don't act on actually your supply chains, your ways of working, your transport, your infrastructure, etc., you're actually going to lose capacity to operate in the future. And I think everyone has to be aware of this situation. And talking about models of acceleration, so I think more research has to be done into really the practical implications. Not necessarily, I mean, it's very important to do it at a planetary level or national level, etc. It's, it has to be done, but it's very important to do it at organizational level, because it goes against a lot of, preconceived ideas. And I think there's a huge effort to be done in terms of capacity building of organizations. And what is today, I mean, there are initiatives in society in different sectors on how can you support organizations in their transformation. This has to be multiplied by 10, by 100, by 1,000. And given the urgency of the situation, we really have to, collaborate, work collectively to provide the tools, to provide the analysis, and to empower organizations to act on ourselves. Another finding which is important is that looking at the carbon trajectories of organizations, what we saw is that what will come from society at large in the coming years in a realistic scenario may have an impact only on a quarter or a third of the emissions of an organization, which means that at least 2/3 to 3/4 comes from internal efforts. So there is a tendency sometimes to say, yeah, well, this is a bigger problem than us. It's the others, it's the industry, it's the finance, it's the governments, etc. But no, actually 2/3 to 3/4 will come from efforts within an organization. And it's time to understand this. It's time to see that the investments are an issue, but it's a workable issue. And it's a lot about finding sometimes, funding mechanisms which actually ease the decision making. And here donors have a role to play by creating this facilitating environment. And I would say managers in institutions need to be, determined and brave in their decision making. It's a lot about choices.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you made a very strong argument. It's affordable. People now cannot argue we cannot do it. It's not the cost that is massive, but it's probably the mobilization that needs to be massive. And that's good because I wanted to turn to Fiona now. And after what Bruno said, how do you see the role of mobilization at large scale to bring more leaders of organizations in operationalizing climate action?
Thanks, and conscious of time, so I'll be relatively brief, but I think mobilization at a large scale can play a really important role in setting out examples for success to follow. I think at the moment what we're witnessing that's potentially quite dangerous is an increasing retreat of businesses, of financial leaders, of even donors, other organizations and institutions pulling back from wanting to lift their head above the parapet, because whatever they say, they will get criticized or slammed. Either it's because they're not doing enough, or that what they're doing isn't in line with the 1.5 degree goal. And I think that push for stronger ambition is always useful. However, I think we've got into a stage where now no businesses are putting themselves forward. They're also, whether it's being slammed by civil society for not going far enough, or even at the moment in the States, for example, attorneys general criticizing businesses for collaborating on climate because of antitrust law, which is I think a real weaponization of that legal frame is I think putting non-state actors in a really delicate position. And so this is really the time for campaigns for mobilization initiatives to lean in to provide that collective sort of protection and support of these non-state actors to be able to step up and humbly say, we know we're not perfect, but here is what we're doing, here is the pathway that we're setting, because we know it's advantageous and it will move us in the right direction and it's economically beneficial. So I think that role of mobilization plays a really important part in creating that protection and supportive protection, and also helping with messaging that will be interpreted in the right way. And so with that humility, but also with specifics on what is being done. The final thing I'll say is that, and thinking back to days in Race to Zero, it was so important to information share. And if you get businesses stepping up and saying, I'm trying to do this, but I'm lacking investment, or I don't know where to do this project, you can bring in a city or an investor, and collectively you're solving problems much faster than you would in individual silos. So I think the cross-stakeholder collaboration in mobilization is really critical, and that kind of continuous drip feed of case studies and of examples where organizations have taken a step forward. Either they've learned lessons of what not to do, or they've been extremely successful, and that needs to be shared. So I think that's a really critical role. The last thing I'll say is that also it's not just cross stakeholder, it also absolutely has to be cross regions. And in order to deliver a fair and equitable transition, which is essentially the only transition we can have anyway, we really need to continue enhancing and strengthening cross-regional collaboration, and whether that's enabling, again, through policies, which we've talked a lot about, empowering or enabling donors or investors to actually really fund projects in developing and emerging economies, or whether it's identifying existing exciting projects in those regions and flashing them up as opportunities for investment. I think that nature of mobilization is also something that we need to collectively as a community do better. And again, we're seeing signs of that progress, but we need to double down on that.
Okay, thank you. So sharing more stories of success across sectors is key. That's what I get from what you've said. I have a couple of more questions to Mathieu and Rob, but as the time is advancing, I would like to propose the public to ask us some questions. Is there anything on Zoom for the moment? No. Is there a question from the public? Yeah, I see 2 hands rising there.
Hello. Taking in mind the comparison between France and Germany, for instance, do you think we can make it without nuclear energy?
You take that one?
Okay. Okay, so thanks for the question. Okay, I will try to give a few numbers in order just to make things easier to see. So following the nuclear accidents in Chernobyl and later in Fukushima, the Germans have decided to get out of the nuclear energy, which was sad because I mean they had the most effective power plant in the whole world. Their production rate was the best in the world, and so okay, now what they have chosen as a path to producing green electricity is to rely on solar and wind energy with an additional input from Russian gas through the Nord Stream channels, pipes. Because the thing is that, in fact, you need energy all the time. You need the electricity during all day because all processes need energy during all day. You can, to some extent, apply some what they call the flexibility in the demand, but it's very limited, in fact. So the thing is that the Germans have installed 120 gigawatts of solar and wind power, and 120 gigawatts is enormous in terms of materials that you need to use, in terms of steel, in terms of aluminum, in terms of carbon fibers that you will use for the wind turbines. Just for comparison, in France we have 60 gigawatts of nuclear, and nuclear is much more efficient in terms of materials, of like minerals and everything, metals, for example, that you use per installed kilowatt. So it means that like it's roughly a factor of 10. So it means that the Germans used 20 times more materials just for electricity than us, not even counting the gas plants. And the thing is that now we are at this stage for the chosen industry, the chosen industrial tools, and now we can compare the results. I mean, the Germans, they are at 800 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, if I'm not mistaken, and we are at 55. So I mean, it's. I hope maybe they are at 400. It's roughly a factor of 8, I think. So they're at 400, I think, and we are at 55. So it means that, I mean, it's a catastrophe. So I like, from my point of view, it's a catastrophe, and I think that any stable political regime should go for the nuclear.
Okay, thank you. Is there another question? There are 1 or 2 more.
Hi, Mary Jim Buer. I've been expert for InnoSuisse, working in the energy sector, mostly smart energy systems and decentralized energy systems, so renewable, etc. It's very interesting. I think that we are in a crisis situation, and just now piggybacking on what you said about nuclear, I was never really for nuclear because it's gonna, if we go for nuclear, we also break all the market for renewable energy, because I mean, that was part of the reason why people didn't support nuclear energy. When I think now we're in such a crisis situation, I would be even open to that. But coming back to my question, what I wanted to say, I think, and this is going to be a little provocative, but I've been working 25 years on climate change. So I think I'm just going to say it. I worked in the UN already, 3 agencies, UNEP, UNCTAD, and IPCC. Okay, I don't say anything wrong with the UN, but I left. I had a very good position and I left because I saw we were not able to make, really, I couldn't myself make any difference. Okay, I was just part of the system. I was doing my job, but I felt like we can't, it's too slow. To wrap it up, it's too slow. And we've seen that. I mean, we've seen that. We're still here talking about it. COP, I don't know what, is there in COP4 in Buenos Aires, and we're still doing COPs. So to say that, I don't believe anymore in the huge institutions. Academia, I've switched to academia, is also another problem, I'm sorry to say, but you have to fit into that game. And it's another problem. We can't wait for academics to either solve the problem. So I'm very sorry, but yeah, luckily we're free as academics to say what we think, a little bit free, because of course, if you're too radical, you're not going to have a career. So sorry for you, but you can become somebody else. I don't know, an activist, entrepreneur, or something else. I'm just saying, what do we need now? It's very serious. What do we need? I think we need more collective action on the ground. And I'm really sorry, but we need people to support those institutions. I was the other day at the Impact Hub in Zurich. I was hoping for, entrepreneurs, young people with ideas to have an impact. What happened? I'm really sorry, but we were supported. We had sponsors from companies. So there was, for example, EWZ, the producer of the Zurich electricity producer, that was sponsoring our challenge. In the end, they never showed up. So already that was crazy. We had Patagonia. Thankfully, Patagonia came in and replaced them, but they have nothing to do with energy except that they care about energy because they're actually people that care. I just want to say we need institutions that support the on-the-ground people. So the people willing to go to hackathons, willing to go to climathons, willing to go, but we need people that can support them properly with the real design thinking process, not some sort of thing where you have 2 minutes to come up with an idea, and that basically you had to have your idea already before, and then they try to make a big hoopla, a big party, and so only the people that were supported before the process are going to be, good at pitching and so on, and then they get some sort of support for basically an insurance on a zipper, which is not going to solve climate change. So I'm sorry, we need real institutions to support the on-the-ground people that will change things, the people that will change things. So I don't know, there's so many people having great ideas, startups and so on, but who will support them? Who will finance these startups? And now in this economic situation, they're all doing badly. They're great people with great ideas, but they need to be financed. And that can change the things, but who will finance them? Sorry, I just said everything. But
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for the emotions carrying the message. Actually, that's good because I had a question related to that, and I'll turn on to Rob and drawn on what was just said. What are your thoughts on how capital for investment can accelerate climate action? We just had.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the questions. It's a big issue. So there's a need for lots of different kinds of investment. And my fear is that at the moment, our societal model is not directing the kinds of investment. Sorry, is there a problem? Hello? I'm afraid I can't hear the auditorium.
Yeah, try again.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me
sorry,
now?
you couldn't hear that.
Can you hear
I was saying it was cutting, the sound was cutting and the video as well. So maybe you can try to answer without the video. Sorry for the public, but I think the sound would be better.
Okay, sorry, let me turn off my own video. Can you hear me all now? There's some kind of delay between us, I think, is causing the problem. You can hear me. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. Thank you. So I'll start again. I was trying to say that I think the issue, as I emphasized with the presentation, that there is a lot of money flowing, and there's a lot of money that's not flowing as well. And so there are forms of investment available. We need many different forms of investment, but the issue at the moment is that the forms of investment are not being matched to the opportunities in the right way. And so that could be across sectors, or whether it's for different kinds of organizations, or we might be talking internationally. So I'll start with the final piece. We've recently seen a very fraught and difficult phase of the global negotiations over loss and damage fund. And the loss and damage fund is an extremely important part of the overall climate finance offering in order to support countries that are disproportionately exposed to damages, to be able to support their economic structure and prevent kind of collapse where those damages from rising climate change occur. And the importance of that fund is that it is concessional. In fact, it needs to be grant-like. This is not something that we're asking repayment for. There is a lot of climate finance at the moment that is currently being delivered as debt at market rates. And now I didn't present the final chart in the slides, and it showed, I think, briefly for you all in the auditorium, but many emerging and developing economies, those countries face spiraling debt at the moment. And that's largely because of inadequate support, inadequate financial structuring, and the use of market and private finance for kinds of investments where that should not be used. So if we sort of extrapolate from this to different kinds of sectors as well, we can think about there are some investments in adapting to and building resilience to climate impacts that will pay return in the future, because they will improve, against the counterfactual, your one's productivity, revenue, and so on. And so concessionality at the start might be necessary for those kinds of investments, but there is a potential of repayment. Moving backwards again, I think with these kind of innovation, that's really the focus of lots of what people are saying here today. There's a lot of focus on the very high risk forms of investment, and I think sort of venture capital has been mentioned. We can't be expecting every solution to explode into enormous dividends and revenues in the future, even if at a sort of macro scale, that's the effect that's happening. And I think that the final point I'd share is that really a lot more structuring from public policy when it comes to the kind of domestic investments in innovation, particularly in Europe and other rich countries, would go a long way. There's a huge problem at the moment with policy uncertainty and undermining the private investment climate. So much could be improved by improving that policy certainty. But to do that, we have to get into the dynamics that folks have been discussing today, which is a two-way street between organizations acting on their own climate targets and cost structures, signaling and providing information, as Bruno and Fiona both said, to help policymakers understand where those kind of gaps really are, and then packages of finance and investment will start to flow in a directional and intentional way. But at the moment, that intentionality is lacking. So yeah, that was a collected thoughts on what I think is quite a big picture issue. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Yeah, I take your conclusion, and like you relied on what Bruno said, and basically, if I can summarize, you said that maybe the exemplarity of some organizations can inspire more structuring policies that will help to channel the right investments and trigger them and remove some barriers. We slowly reaching the end. We have to stop at 5, right? Okay, so we are in the 5-6 more last minutes. Sorry, I'm hesitating. I think I'll give you the opportunity, every one of you, to have a 1-minute conclusion in a few sentences, or just the last sentence to conclude. So we will start by Fiona. This panel, please.
Thank you. I think, well, first of all, thank you so much. And it's been really fascinating to listen to co-panelists as well. So great to be part of this. I think as a lasting thought, I would just want to reiterate the exciting opportunities that this transition presents. And I think we really have to shift our mindsets towards understanding what those opportunities really mean at every level, both for governments and policies, for the businesses, the finance space, the organizations, and for civil society and everything in between. And this is really a question of a global scale collaboration to leverage that. So I think in the mobilization, and as we all and each of us collectively look towards driving this transition, I think making sure that we're helping to encourage that mindset of opportunity based on the scientific evidence that is underway is really important.
Rob?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm afraid we couldn't hear half a bit of what you said. Thank you. I suppose I would conclude with a reflection and prompt for everyone in the audience on the panel, and indeed thank you for this opportunity to join this interesting conversation. My prompt would just be to ask everybody to reflect on what might really radically change how you do things in a few years' time, and whether that's a new technology or a new process or a new way of structuring your operations and efforts. And then added to that, who might you be able to work with? Who might you be able to share that idea, that dream, that hope, that inspiration with, that could then build one of these connections and collaborations that we've been talking about here today, that I think are really the root of all this innovation. So yeah, what is it you're hoping to see change in the next few years? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll give the floor to Bruno, and maybe Mathieu, you can finish. Go ahead, Bruno.
Yeah, no, I think as a conclusion, I would say that, you know, if we look at the picture, there are a lot of things moving and accelerating in society. Also, both, you know, the risks, but also I would say the approach to the problem. There's a lot of solutions which are perfectly known and described. The benefits of action outweigh the costs very, very clearly, and they're within usually, you know, the decisional margins of many organizations and institutions. So I think it's, you know, what's needed today is really to have a critical mass of organizations and institutions who actually, you know, lead by example, and we know that you know, policies change when actually practices already exist in society, and what the policy does is it generalizes a practice which is already adopted by part of the society. And what is needed today is really to have this critical mass in many different sectors that will actually create the political conditions for you know, more important policy changes. And I think everyone has a very clear role to play, and to create this environment that can considerably accelerate impacts and action.
Okay, thank you. And I imagine that will support the underground people that are taking action also in the operationalization. And we are in the last 1 minute. So Mathieu, what is your conclusion?
Thank you, Alexandre. So yes, as a conclusion, I wanted to point out a last co-benefit of action that I think no one has mentioned is that in fact we want to attract young people to organizations that move. And it will be a huge challenge for organizations that don't move fast enough to attract students. And I'm still a student. I was in university just a few years ago, and I see how quickly it changes. Even when I was in the university 3 years ago compared to generations that are now, it's crazy. I mean, they are crazy compared to as we were there then. So I mean, organizations really have a huge issue there. They need to move, otherwise no one will come. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. It's a matter of life or death for them. Thank you very much. So thank you. We are bang on time. It's exactly 5, and I think we're moving to the closing remarks soon, right?
Setting things up. So it's been an intense and intensive day. So we're welcoming now on the stage Dr. Karim Lawabdia Selami. Is actually he has such a long and brilliant career, but he's also our very dear president, the president of the Climate Action Accelerator. Karim is the former deputy general director of the Agence Française de Biomédecine, a French government body, and a former director of MSF's campaign for essential medicine and former director general of MSF in Paris. So Karim will deliver some closing remarks. Thank you. Do you need technical support from us? Okay, great.
I will deliver the closing remarks in French. Just we talked in English, all the day. That's why we have to maybe to switch for the ones, who cannot understand French. You have, headsets, at the back, and you can take them. So, la journée, comment conclure une journée qui a été aussi riche à tous les niveaux, puisque le thème était comment accélérer effectivement les actions climat pour mieux répondre aux besoins en croissance, et comment les acteurs de l'aide et de la santé peuvent répondre aux besoins croissants de ces populations en accélérant la réduction de leurs émissions. On a eu plusieurs panels. Je ne vais pas faire un résumé des panels parce qu'ils ont été faits à la fin de chaque panel. L'introduction a été quand même assez riche aussi. En ce qui concerne le panel 1 qui concernait effectivement un zoom sur l'aide alimentaire et la nutrition et l'agriculture, qui représente près de 50% des émissions du secteur humanitaire, d'émissions de gaz à effet de serre du secteur humanitaire international. Et face à la croissance des besoins des populations et la diminution aussi des rendements agricoles, comment peut-on développer les capacités à aider les populations les plus vulnérables et renforcer la résilience et à diminuer leur empreinte carbone? Beaucoup d'enjeux. Bien sûr, on a retenu qu'il n'y a pas, comme on dit en anglais, no one size fits all. L'innovation est clé. Le pouvoir importance de collaborer, d'apprendre les uns des autres, d'échanger. La recherche est fondamentale, et effectivement aussi l'engagement des stakeholders. Sur les soins de santé, comment améliorer les prestations et comment repenser des modèles d'organisation des soins de santé et quelle approche opérationnelle pour maximiser les bénéfices et dans les pays à ressources limitées. Kiran nous a beaucoup parlé du Tchad, effectivement, et qui était très intéressant. Alors, on a eu aussi de la part de Jamila Mahmoud une présentation très intéressante. La collection de données est aussi clé pour prioriser les mesures et évaluer les progrès faits. Comment incentiver les fournisseurs de soins pour acheter des produits, mais par envoyant des signaux au marché, et que la vision doit être faite à partir du niveau local et être répandue au niveau des primary healthcare. En ce qui concerne le dernier panel, on vient de l'avoir, donc je ne vais pas développer à nouveau puisque ça a été fait. Donc, il y a eu ce que je pense qu'on peut dégager comme vraiment messages clés qui sont, voilà, c'est d'abord que Gupta nous a rappelé que nous étions déjà 6 des 9 planetary boundaries ont été dépassés et que aujourd'hui nos marges de manœuvre rétrécissent. Et les organisations ont la responsabilité d'agir maintenant sur au moins ce qu'elles contrôlent. Exponential Action, qui est bien sûr supporté par des mobilisations, la recherche scientifique, les investissements massifs qui ont le potentiel de nous amener là où nous voulons être. Des stratégies de réduction des émissions, des stratégies ambitieuses qui n'empêchent pas la capacité des organisations de répondre aux besoins dans les domaines de la santé et de la nourriture. Et donc, qui doivent plutôt renforcer les capacités des acteurs d'opérer dans ce monde. Plus doit être fait pour développer des alternatives qui soient abordables, qui soient durables, qui soient bien sûr low carbone et qui soient résilientes et qui soient des solutions qui soient supportées par des efforts locaux et globaux pour repenser et redessiner des modèles. L'effort de déployer ces alternatives doit être bien sûr soutenu par différentes organisations, mais aussi par des bailleurs de fonds. Et tout le monde doit collaborer pour co-créer des solutions et définir de nouveaux référentiels et des cadres de travail. J'ai retenu une phrase de Jamila Mahmoud qui disait que faire, je crois que c'est elle, ouais, de faire que les accords de Paris soient plus obligatoires et non pas volontaires. Voilà, et ça, je pense que c'est un point qui est quand même fondamental. Il y a eu aussi un appel, bien sûr, à l'action et on a parlé beaucoup de leadership pour avoir des actions collaboratives pour aller plus loin et accélérer le pas vers les actions sur le climat. Vraiment, les mots qui sont revenus tout au long de la journée, ça a été collaboration, action collective, mobilisation pour entraîner les différentes organisations et aussi les politiques, parce qu'effectivement, sans les politiques, on n'avancera pas non plus, parce qu'on peut le voir aujourd'hui. Hein. Donc, il faut absolument se mobiliser, travailler ensemble et aller de l'avant et même discuter avec ceux qui ne sont pas d'accord, parce que c'est avec cela aussi qu'on pourra avancer. Voilà donc les points forts que j'ai un peu soulevés et retenus des différentes interventions qui étaient quand même très, très, très riches. Et je pense que tout le monde a apprécié la journée. Et donc, voilà. Avant de clore la journée, je vais faire des remerciements. D'abord, des remerciements à tous les partenaires pour leur collaboration et pour leur contribution à l'action de CRA. Je remercie tous les panélistes et les modérateurs, les institutionnels qui ont soutenu cet événement, comme le canton de Genève, l'Office fédéral des affaires étrangères allemand, les centres de crise et de soutien du ministère des Affaires étrangères français, ECHO, donc de l'Union européenne, et tous nos autres donneurs qui ont soutenu et qui soutiennent notre travail. Je remercie effectivement le campus biotech pour nous avoir permis de tenir cet événement et à nous avoir fourni la traduction, et les partenaires en communication pour couvrir cet événement. Bien sûr, cet événement n'aurait pas pu avoir lieu si toutes les équipes de CAA, les internes, les volontaires qui travaillent avec nous, incluant les étudiants du Graduate Institute, qui viennent et qui nous soutiennent aujourd'hui sur leur temps libre. Et aussi, je remercie les traducteurs qui ont été quand même parfois peut-être mis en difficulté par la rapidité des discours. Un remerciement très spécial à Béatrice. Je ne la vois pas. Elle est où? Elle se cache. Pour avoir mis en musique et permettre à cet événement de se tenir. Merci Béatrice. Et aussi à Macarena Castro, voilà, une petite lève. Voilà. Sans laquelle, effectivement, ce jour n'aurait pas été possible. Voilà, donc cet événement prend fin. Effectivement, il y aura les 2 derniers événements l'an dernier et cette année, donc nous permettent de pouvoir tirer les leçons, et on va tirer les leçons de ces événements pour à l'avenir, parce que de toute façon, il y aura un événement annuel, c'est très important, et donc de pouvoir peut-être penser la forme et l'organisation. Donc, je remercie aussi Bruno Jochum sur le travail qu'il fait à CA, et aussi toutes les équipes qui sont autour de lui. Merci à tous.